that's right. So this is planned. Yeah, it's got an element of planned and unplanned. It's spontaneous, isn't it, really, this is? Although, having said that, sometimes disciplinary checks, one of the people has gone into that room very prepared beforehand. But okay, yeah, so it's planned. It's got an element of research in it, hasn't it? You know, the person who's coming in has got a list of questions that they want to get answers to. That's it. Anything else? They're the main things, aren't they? Okay, so what makes a good interviewer? What do you think? What are the qualities that make a good interviewer?
Planning extensively.
Planning. Well, yes. And what does that mean? Because one of the things I was just thinking, with what you're about to do, with the people, like you're going to interview Yao, you're going to interview Dr. Lynch, who's the first person, the first teacher, whatever, is that what I would ask them for, if they can possibly give it to you before you interview, is to give kind of, I don't say a CV, I don't mean that, but almost like a resume of what, maybe when they arrived in Milton Keynes, what their first job was, what they went on to do, or major incidents to help you plan, because, I always think seeing interviews, it's a bit like squeezing an orange. Here's this, there's all this sort of information, all this juice to be squeezed out. And if you've got the triggers that, because you're not with someone for very long, but in terms of that research, is to try and get, so with Yao, for example, there will be a number of things, so I'm sure he'll be able to sort of give you a list of the major sort of achievements that he's had, both since he's got here and actually, his thing started a bit before. Hi there.
This is Leslie.
Hi there, Leslie. We're just talking about interviewing. We've got a bit about what makes a good interviewer. And the first thing that's been mentioned is about planning and about research. And I'm saying that whoever you're going to interview, if you can get them to give you a brief resume, in this case, because you're going to be interviewing people about their life in Milton Keynes and their achievements in Milton Keynes, to get them to sort of give you the milestones, as it were, so that will help guide your interview. Say, I see you arrived in Milton Keynes you came here in 1984. Why did you come? Why then? What was your first? It'll help you sort of frame up those questions. So planning, research, yeah. So where would you go for this kind of thing? You're going to do the first policeman. Yeah. So besides that resume, is there anything else that you think might help you in your interview?
Also, one of the older police stations, was down in Bletchley, ask if they have any details of the first laps that they had there.
Oh, right, okay, yeah. You might be getting that in a minute on my phone. But is there anything else that you might be able to do that will give you a kind of a context, that would give a context? He arrives in 1986. It might be an idea to find out if there are any particular things that were happening around that time that might, they might have, if you like, come into contact with in their, it wasn't a riot, I don't think, in 86, but if there was, that kind of thing, were you involved in that? Because people will, you only get what you ask for in one sense, but sometimes people will go off on a track that they might not include they might not necessarily bring to the fore everything that, that if you trigger their memory, there'll be other things which they will bring up. So planning, what else makes a good interviewer? Yeah, tell me what you mean by that.
When you ask a question, and you're not scared to ask questions.
Yes, yeah. Confidence. Without being arrogant, yeah. Without being nervous in a sense, because when you do the interview, you are setting the tone, in a sense, right? So if you are, if you go, I'm not quite sure how this can well. If you're like that, you're setting, whoever you're interviewing is thinking, oh God, what's going on here? Or either this like blooming useless, or it's kind of put me off. So it's up to you to kind of set the tone and be confident in what you're doing. Yeah. Anything else? What else makes a good interviewer?
A little bit of like empathy and capacity to sort of understand.
So how do you do that? How do you do it? Oh, I really understand what you're trying to say. I really sympathise. How do you do it? How do you get that across to people?
When I'm trying to empathise with somebody, if they make a comment, I try to sort of say something back that helps them understand that I understand.
Yeah.
But I don't really know how to put it. It's something that comes naturally most times.
Yes, but how would you do it? You're there to encourage them to speak. How would you show that you're empathising with them without saying anything?
Maybe show interest.
How do you show interest?
With your body language.
What bit about body language? How do you do it? How do you show you're interested? How do you show you're interested?
Okay.
Right? No, I'm just saying, no. So that is, it's just being open. You know, that's the thing. If you, in your stance, you know, when you're sitting talking to someone, you know, if you're sitting like this, as it were, you know, you kind of, come on then, you know, convince me, kind of thing. But if you're sitting like this, right, and you're leaning forward, you're always looking at people. Okay, so the whole thing is, so empathy really via body language. So you have an open stance, you don't sit directly opposite someone, you sit to this, you know, so you're not sort of confronting them head on. You do it so that people can look out and away, because when people answer you, they're not going, they go, you know, they come back to you, right? You must be looking at them when they come back. And when you are beginning to interview people, and you'll see this again and again, what people do is they've got their list of questions or topics, and they will go, when did you come to Milton Keynes? And they're like this, you know, looking for the next question. A friend of mine, when she does a training session like this, she arranges, they're sort of around a table, and she's got the people on one side are the interviewees, and the people on the other side are the interviewers. And what she does, she goes behind with sort of cards saying, show you're interested. These are all the interviewers over here, show you're interested, right? And then she'll pick up, they're just chatting, you know, doing their chat. You are slightly bored, right? You are very bored and don't show any interest. And then they say to the people afterwards, the people who are the interviewees, what was it like? And they start to say, well, it was fine to begin with. They seemed to be interested in what I was saying, but in the end I felt angry because they weren't, you know, they didn't take any interest in what I was saying, you know. So I know that's exaggerated, but you don't want people speaking into a void. It's interesting. I've just, over the last couple of years, been doing, we've done about 83 hours of interviews with about 30 odd people who were key people in the very early years of the Development Corporation. And I was doing it with a friend, and and this might be something you want to do. When someone says something that you're going to follow up, you've got a choice. You can either hold it in your head, or you can just write, you might say to someone, how do you feel about it? Oh, I was very angry about it, and they never explain it. So you just write down why angry or something like that. You just to prompt yourself, right? You know, you can hold it in your head. I tend to try and do it by just holding it in my head, so I don't write notes. But the chap I was doing it with was writing his notes, and the person who was being interviewed, I was behind the camera, and this is one of the things about video that's different to audio. With audio, it doesn't matter, you know, where your head is doesn't matter. But in video, I don't know really what, you know, when you see stuff on the telly where if the eye starts moving, you know, to show, and there's someone else, this is really kind of off-putting. So I had to, when people, there was Lee, he was writing down like this, and they were talking to him, and they'd lost their point of the interested party, right? So they would look to me, and I would either have to go like that, and there was nothing to do, he then go back to talk about, or I'd hide behind the camera, so he couldn't maintain eye contact with me. But terribly important, this thing about, you know, having your eyes there when people, because as I say, they don't just look all the time, you know, and you forget about the question, the next question, you can deal with that, but just concentrate on looking. And how do you, one of the common ways to show people that you're interested and you're empathising is to go, yeah. Now, I don't know what technique you're going to use in these films. I tend to prefer to let the person speak themselves and not to have me in it at all. That's mainly because I do lots of ums and ers and asking questions. So I cut myself out. But if I've got, yeah, going underneath, you can't get that off the soundtrack. Okay? So, how do you do it? How do you show your empathising? Yeah, you nod. You nod. You even, if someone's telling a funny story, you develop a kind of a, you know, I know it looks very stupid and odd, but I went and did some training with a group in Oxford, this was a few years ago now, and they were doing a thing about the Second World War on the home front. And I went and taught, it was audio. I came back 6 weeks later, they'd done some interviews, and I taught them how to do sound editing. And I made this tip. Well, they had the story of a woman who'd been a teenager during the Second World War, and she'd gone along to a dance in Oxford. And, you know, she was a bit nervous there, and, you know, sort of sitting around and waiting for dance. And along comes this bloke to ask for a dance. He was really kind of, he really fancied her, a very smooth moustache. Anyway, she came and asked her for a dance. And as soon as she said, well, she said yes, got up, and immediately regretted it, because he was in cheek to cheek, and all this kind of thing. End of the dance comes, he walks away, and his moustache is on her cheek. And very good, silent laugh. And what was great was the person telling the story didn't. She laughed rather, but the person hearing the story had done the silent laugh. You show I mean, they know they're being recorded, so but you show that you are, you know. I mean, I know it looks stupid, but when you come to do your edit, you want that story in there. You want the people hearing the story. It's almost as though they're telling them, and there's no, they're telling them directly. So we've got empathy. What else makes a good interview? The question. Oh, yeah. You've got to ask questions. But I know. We're going to the obvious here.
Because it says, like, what's your favourite colour? And then people just say red, and I see that. And say, like,
Yeah.
why?
Actually, what is your favourite? It's an open-ended question, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's questions, isn't it? And questions that are open, not closed. Do people understand what that means? Do people understand open questions?
So
Then, sorry?
I've given you a black marker.
That one
That's
there?
it, yeah.
They know, I mean, my granddaughter who comes to your film, I was asking about open questions, and they do this now in primary school, so we all should know. It's the what, when, where, why, and as you say, that is, the why is the most telling question of all, is people will say something, and they'll give you an answer, and you know, but why did you do that, right? And it's not, why did you do that? It's, you are curious, you want to understand, you want to go beyond the, I want to say almost like practiced answer. Because one of the things you're doing in an interview is you're finding, people are telling you what went on. When, you know, when you ask, when you came to Milton Keynes as a policeman, what was it like, blah, 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 blah. But The other thing is that they're now looking back on the past, something that happened 20, 30, 40 years ago, and there's an element of reflection in it. And, you know, so this is what you thought you were doing then, but what do you think about it now? You know, and look, you know, and that's an important part of it. Why do you think you did it like that? Or you can say, when you were there, why did you do it like that? And then, all right, what do you think about that now? So you want to get people to reflect if they can on things. So you want to have those questions, and not so much necessarily a list of questions, really, you want topics, but in presenting those topics that you might want to deal with, you present them with an open-ended way. The other thing is, and these interviews are not going to be long, are they? Not going to be too long, 20, 30 minutes, are they? You're doing like, how many, like 5-10 minute documentaries, aren't you?
That's right, there's 6.
Much easier to do this in this situation than it is in much longer interviews. But what you want people to, what you've got to do is imagine that your voice isn't there with that question. So, what's your favourite colour? And the person goes, red. And you're going to edit on the word red. Doesn't mean anything. So, one of the things is, without putting people off, in the sense of making you think, oh my God, I'm befuddled here, ask them, if they can, to include your question in their answer. Okay, so, what's your favourite colour? Instead of red, my favourite colour is red. Okay, then that stands on its own, doesn't it? It doesn't need the question beforehand. You can take that on its own. So sometimes when you're having a question, if you're doing a longer interview and someone says, I don't know, they're talking about a particular thing, you can almost bet that somewhere else in the interview you can almost kind of pick it up and put that word in there or whatever, but it is worth just saying to you, if you could you just start that again and include my question in it, okay? If you think they're starting off and it's not got that kind of context, that is where your confidence is needed, really, to do that.
I was just going to say, I have heard questions asked in a little bit vague ways in order to get people to do that. So, like, if something happened in 1986, could you tell us a bit about what happened in 1986? And if it's a very standout moment in that person's mind, they're likely to say, oh, well, yeah, back then this happened, so on, so on, so on.
That, I mean, if you like, that would come from if they provided you. I mean, if you said to me, tell me what happened in 1986, I'm going, talking about. If it was a kind of a milestone, that was when they got promoted to be sergeant or whatever, or they did something. If it was a chemo, that kind of thing does. The other thing is that we talk about all these open questions: what, when, where, why, how, what, and so on. But there are other ways as well. Get people to say things like, and some people are good at this, and some people aren't. Could you describe to me what it was like walking into your classroom for your first lesson? Can you remember what that was like? Particularly if they might just say, oh God, I can remember my first day there. And they give it, but they might say, I've had some amazing things where you say to people, can you kind of, often when you want to practice with people, you say, what do you remember about your first day at school? And they will say, they'll talk about things, when they went there and who they met and whatever. But I've often said to people, if also metaphorically, close your eyes and walk into that classroom and describe what you see. Now, you remember your first classroom at school? Remember what it was like?
Yeah,
So, okay, walk into that room and tell me what you see.
It's when I was in reception, when I was a little in Italy, when I first moved here, my English wasn't that good. And I just remember I was just hiding behind my basically, and I could just see all the other kids. After the teacher just tried to bring me into the classroom. That's it really. come.
Can you remember what that classroom, how that classroom was laid out? What it looked like?
Yeah, there's a table after like half a wall then, and then go around that wall, that was just carpet up there at the bottom side, and then bean bags everywhere, up the sandpit and the next to the table. Stuff like that.
Okay, so you can see, people can describe, they can describe that. I think some people are better than others, yeah, use that as a technique as well as just. So one of the things we're going to do in a minute is we're going to talk about what the questions might be that you might ask. Okay, but so we need questions. What else do you need to be a good interviewer?
Understanding of the situation.
Yeah, tell me more.
Try to show that you're actually listening.
That is the key. I was going to say, listening, right? That is the key. That is one of the other key things. And the other one about, I think you just hit on the other two that I can think of is, one is listening. Oh, that's better.
Is that friendly? Yeah. I was
That's
working.
better. And the other one is respect, as it were, is the listening bit. Listening. Oh, this is perfect. Listening means not interrupting. Okay? Let the person tell their story. And because when people talk, they sometimes fish around, they're trying to get themselves in gear. And if you just come I've been doing this for 40 years, and I tell you, this is still my worst fault. I'm too enthusiastic. Someone says something, and I want to get in there. The other thing is that when people speak, when they give you an answer, they don't give you all of the answer. Okay? There will be some things that, let's say we're talking about your first day at school, or whatever. Where was this school? When was it? There's all kinds of details that when you just ask the person to tell the story, that you need to get more details on. Okay, so there's those things. The other thing is, I said there'll be clues in the speech. I was very upset when I went to school for the first time. I haven't explained it. Okay. And so when you came back, when they've given their answer, you come back with, you mentioned then that you were upset going to school first. Why was that? Okay. So you're picking up the clues. Now, as I said, this is probably the most difficult bit of interviewing. And it might be that you do need to just take, just put some notes down, when, what, whatever, to kind of give you a clue to what you're rather than retaining it all in your head. And if you do that, what you do need to warn the person that is you're interviewing that's what you're doing. But having said that, as I just explained, in my recent experience with Lee, is that even if you say that to people, the people who are being interviewed are looking round for someone to tell that story to, and if you're down there like this, so if you can, being a video interview, if you can hold it. The other thing is, I think that the camera person, you're going to be doing this with a camera man, then I think that the camera person might, at a point, later on, and I've done, I do this in the interviews we do with Lee. I will ask a question, but say, can you direct it? Can you answer it to Lee, so that the I bit is in the right place? But I go in as a team, really, so that the person who is behind the camera will also, because there'll be things that the person who's operating the camera thinks, well, why did you ask that way? And I don't think you should be afraid to do that. But but do it towards the end of the interview. You know, you said earlier something I wondered about, could you direct your answer to? You know, that.
Just to clarify, that would be the camera person intervening in the
Yes.
interview towards the end.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I do it towards the end. Yeah. When there are things that they might, you know, but because I think one of the things is video, in my experience, is a completely different experience. Different thing to an audio. If you're in an audio is great, you know, because you can just sit down with someone, just check that the room is fairly silent or whatever, put the mic on, sit there next door to one another, whatever, just off you go. With video, you're thinking, first of all, I mean, I would imagine the interview is going to take place here, are they? All going to take place here, or are they going to take place in people's
I
offices?
think it's on site wherever they go.
On site,
Yes.
right, okay. So, the first thing when you go anywhere is, what's the light like? Right, where's the light coming from here? So, there's the person in their office, but actually they're sitting in front of a fantastic plate glass window. The sun's coming in, you know, there they are, honestly, in silhouette. You're thinking, okay, well, we can't have them here. So there's all this stuff about moving people around and then, you know, maybe just setting up the room so, you know, just move them. You know, if you're doing that with someone and the camera person is sorting all this out, you know, you're going to be using a light, are you?
Possibly they have got some.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm to be honest, I only use a light. I've only recently been using a light, actually. I've just got one light in on. But again, if it's a team, you can have a light and you can have a person with a reflector and all this fancy stuff. But anyway, but you said it's important that the person who is the interviewer engages with the interviewee, almost to establish a relationship, right? And then when you set up, if you're being interviewed and the camera's over, the camera will be over here, and I would try and set up not quite this close, but you know, in an intimate situation. So the camera's over here, and I'm not obviously in range, but I want to kind of make this person look at me and have that kind of eye contact. Okay. So listening, not interrupting, picking up the clues from speech. And the other thing I think you hinted at, I call it respect. You know, the person you're talking to is, if you like, an eyewitness to history. You weren't there. Sometimes when this is a different kind of project, you're going to see an individual about a particular, one thing. But if you're doing a bigger project where you've got, the project we had, they all work for the Development Corporation. We're looking at people, the oldest person we interviewed was 96. So memory might not always be totally reliable. It's really important that you do not, if you like, use your knowledge to put people down. This is their moment in the sun, as it were. They will be, it's very interesting, these older people, knowing that the information is going to go into the Living Archives archive, and this is their chance to write themselves in history. Really, that's what we found. It was quite interesting. They wanted to claim for all kinds of things, but you know, you might have done some research, and that if you think, well, wait a minute, that isn't right, then you've got to be very careful about the way it might be. Oh, you know, you always be innocent, you know, in the sense, oh, I thought that might have been in whatever. You know, yeah. When did the Second World War end? What year did the Second World War end?
1943?
1945. It's when we had VE Day, followed by VJ Day, when they dropped the atom bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. So when someone says, well, when the Second World War ended in 1946, what do you say?
Oh, I thought, I read online that it was 1945.
Yeah, so what, I mean, the way I would do it is exactly I was saying, sorry, I thought that VE Day and VJ Day were in 1945. That's when, you know, they're finished. You know, why are you saying 1946 now? They could say, no, of course it was. Yeah. Sorry, I meant 1945, right? But they might say, well, my husband was a prisoner of war, and he didn't get home till, or I wasn't demobbed until 1946, or whatever, right? It's to go behind, but it's not to, 46, not that long. People make mistakes, but at the same time, they might, you know, there might be a reason for them. Very interesting. The very first big project I did in terms of interviewing for play was about the First World War. And you go for, in terms of doing your questions, I mean, it's a bit like I said earlier, the policeman, if there was a riot in Milton Keynes, they would almost certainly have a memory of that, you know, a red letter day, something special. You know, if I was asking you about what did you do last Wednesday, you probably haven't got no memory. If I said, and if last Wednesday you had to have an accident, have a baby, went to hospital, whatever, you know, these are big moments, and you tend to have memories, gone on holiday, whatever. They're special moments, right? And so when we ask people about the First World War, the first question we asked them was, can you remember what you were doing on the day that war broke out? And people would go, yeah, that was August the 4th, 1914. Or, you know, that was Monday. Bank holiday Monday was August 4th. So in the end, to make it easier for people, I said, my opening question, as I went on and got this information, was, can you remember what you were doing on the day that war broke out? You know, Bank holiday Monday, August the 4th, 1914. Well, in the course of doing the research, I'd come across a remarkable man by an unusual name. His name was Ortin Mundy. He lived in New Bradwell. He had been he joined up very early on in the First World War and had gone through, been wounded 3 times, come back to Britain and so on, and then he'd been taken prisoner with the Germans, so he was like all the way through the war. And he started recording his memories on his own on a crummy kind of cassette recorder that when you turn the microphone on, it kind of activated the recorder. And he was nearly blind, and his great nephew used to put the cassettes in, you know. And so I met him before I started the research actually, and he made me kind of listen to these things. The recording quality was rubbish, but what was on it was unbelievable. And he took it from the time that they went over the top in the Second Battle of Arras in 1916 or whatever it was, till coming back home. Anyway, we decided that he was going to be the person whose life this play was going to be built around. Mainly because when he spoke, he said, I said, and our plays only use the actual words, the documents or the actual words that people spoke. So he was made for it, right? And the story he told and the humour he did it with and the reflection he had, it was absolutely fantastic. Anyway, so I went back, he'd done 10 hours of this other stuff. I went back and took him from joining up to when he got to this point of going over the top. And that was actually turned out to be another 5 hours. So, okay, the first question I asked him when we go on this bit is, what do you remember about the day that the First World War broke out? Bank holiday Monday, August the 4th, 1914. August the 4th was a Tuesday, says Ortin. Now, this is the very first, I mean, luckily, we've got 10 hours of stuff in it. Went and checked, August the 4th was a Tuesday. Everyone else was wrong. Well, prompted by me telling them it was Bank holiday Monday. So, yeah. So, this is the point about be curious, but don't put people down. Don't, life is not black and white, and we've all got our own personal way of doing it. Our memory is based, we don't remember everything, do we? We don't remember everything. But our memory is shaped by our own personal sense of self, right? So we tend to remember the bits where we look quite good when you're looking back over whatever number of years. And say we don't remember everything, but at the same time, you do realise that that's what's interesting. What I found interesting about doing oral history, when you're doing it about, say, a topic like the First World War or whatever, Second World War on the home front, whatever it might be, you get a lot of people talking about the same topic, and they're all slightly different. I mean, I had a thing with the story about the era's first rock and roll band. This was in the 50s, and it was the era of dance bands. And you used to, the nearest, they just started to have very simple disco. Well, I say discos, it wasn't like discos now. It'd be someone in a pub with a record player and putting on some of the records like Elvis Presley and Bill Haley and things like that. This particular young man listened to, there was a radio station, I think it's still going, Radio Luxembourg, where there used to be pop music, a bit like Radio 1 before Radio 1 was even thought of. And he was a musician, he could work out what chords were done, and he would write out the music, and he'd get his mates, and they were, typical thing, 3 chords on the guitar, nothing. Anyway, they were a sensation in this area, absolute sensation. And people came along, and their family ran a pub in Yarny Gobi, so they played in this pub one night, and the kids went out on the buses to it. And when they got there, when they had the event, on the way back, there was one bus, the last bus, so everyone piled onto this bus, and this is when their bus conductor as well, the conductor would say, go upstairs and say, you can't stand upstairs, you've got to come down. In the meantime, while he's up there, they're filling up, downstairs. It's not the only way to get home. And in despair, they went off to phone, I don't know if it was the police or the bus company, say, what do we do about this? And the story was, the first story I heard was, one of the lads, they're in their late teens, 20s, got in the bus and drove it to Stony Stratford. In the end, there were about 3 or 4 versions of what happened. I think what probably happened, it got in and drove it about 100 yards, was probably the final truth. But, we're looking at memory over a long period of time, and this almost became an urban myth that this bloke had driven it to Stony Stratford. So, you're going to get different versions of things on a big project like that. So, leave your mind open, have the respect for people. Anything else? Well, anything else you might think makes a good interviewer? The other one is, the main one is have we got it down here? I don't know where you got it down. We've got to talk about it. Empathy. Yeah, it's empathy. It's being interested. Because in fact, this empathy thing, you're actually showing you're interested by the nodding and the looking and everything else like that. You've got to. You're not, if you like, you're not respecting anyone if you ask them to, you do an interview and you're not actually interested in what they're going to tell you. I'm a nosy bastard, really, and I must say, 40 years it's been, I have loved listening to people. I do believe fervently that everybody has a story to tell, and that we do hear the most extraordinary things, and people are amazing. They are amazing. But if you're setting out for this and you're not interested, then don't do it. It's not, don't waste people's time. But be interested, find out, as much as you can before you go in the interview, as we said, and then when you're in there, show you're interested as well. Okay. So far. So any other?
Yeah, I was going to say, what about timing? You could rush it through or...
Oh, well, I think that's a very good thing. There is a tendency when you are doing an interview for the first time that you do tend to rush it. You don't listen and do the follow-up questions. You do tend to kind of whip through it. Partly because you are. I mean, you might very well want to be like the rabbit in the headlights. I think it's important that you go in there. I know you haven't done it before, but this is a person that if you were having a chat with them and you sat down and you met someone who happened to be the first black policeman in Milton Keynes, or the first, you talk to someone like Yao. I mean, you've got an easy one there. You're doing Yao, aren't you? He is a fascinating character. Got a larger life. He's got a wonderful story to start off. I don't know whether he'll tell you well, I might have it actually here, because Living Archives, just on a project, we interviewed 50 people, right? They were all short interviews, a bit like yours, but the only difference was that the first out, a book was published last week using this material, but the main output was a series of 50 digital stories, short stories. None of them, I think it's true, because we ran out of filmmaking time, and I ended up doing all of these 50 edits. None of them are more than 2 minutes long. But Yao did this interview of, I think it was about 30 odd minutes. So part of the thing was and you'll have the same job later, we'll talk about that later on, is you've got to, what is the story here? What is the bits? Because you're going to have miles too much, but you've got an audience out there, they're not interested in 30 minutes of whatever. What we found was the reason for being 2 minutes is if you're going into a museum, being nosy, you'll probably give 2 minutes of your time to hear a story, particularly if it's not just head and shoulders, there's a cutaway stuff. We can see some examples later on. So, we've come to the bit about any other things about it, but that's right, we paste it, listen, and then the other thing is, is there anything else you want to say? Is almost like your last question. I mean, sometimes when people, structuring the interview, we can talk a bit about that. What you tend to do, when you go and do an interview, what's the first question you ask?
How are you doing today?
Sorry?
How are you doing today? Or is that before?
Well, yeah, I would do that. Yeah, we're going to start now. So the first question is, now remember, your interviews are going to end up in the Living Archive. I always think in my head, I'm interviewing for someone to listen to this in 50 years' time. I don't know what format, 50 years' time. I don't know. So what's your first question?
Why?
Who is this person?
Ask them to state who they are and what they've been doing.
Well, I think the first thing is, what is your name?
And then they,
That's not what it's. Yeah, what's your name? Could you start by telling me your name and when and where you were born? So, when born, where, whatever the interview you're doing, I think it's quite important to give a bit of almost like personal background on someone. So obviously if you say, it's significant, just in this project, where were you born? Well, if they were born in Nigeria, Kenya, whatever, but they might have been born in Milton Keynes and be the first black policeman, might have, so when and where and so on. So you've got an age thing. What else would you like to know? Just a general bit of background about someone before you get going.
If they were born in the country, what age, what age?
Well, that's a bit further on, is it? That's almost like your thing, your topic is about their life as well in Milton Keynes. So you're going to bring them to them, so you find out they're born in Nigeria. So, when did you come to this country, or when did you come to Milton? Well, I actually arrived, we came to, first we moved to London, then da. But yeah, so that's almost like into the topic, as it were. What other stuff would you like to know about someone?
The parents.
Exactly. A little bit about, the kind of the family background, how many brothers and sisters. I mean, we're not talking long interviews here. We're just a little bit of background, a little bit about family, education, maybe. And yeah, first job, maybe, just a little bit. The point is that if I don't know, if someone is an artist, right, let's say Yao, I don't know, I've got what his family background, but if he came from a family of his mother or father was an artist and he'd grown up in a background of that kind of thing, or if not, if they were, I don't know, tax inspectors, there's a story there in a sense, isn't there? that is a kind of a clue to where you might go. How the hell did you get into art? Why? Where did that all come from? If your family background, you know, if the first black policeman, the woman in Milton Keynes, their parents were policemen. Well, you know, but if they weren't, you know, you've got to kind of go, how did you get into that? Why did you want to become a policeman? Okay? And the other thing about this is these are the easy questions. Right? This is, I always remember going to see, I was interviewing a chap on behalf of a friend, and he'd written his life story. It was 2 pages long. So, 3 hours later, I sort of scratched the surface. But he said, "Oh, I must go and get my notes." I said, "Ron, this is your life. you don't need notes for your life." Anyway, so this is the kind of easy part. Having said that, I did some training for a group of young people who were going to be, they had all been in care, and they were going to be interviewing people who had been in care, you know, different aged people. Well, asking the question, "Tell me about your family life," was the first question. It's not a good idea. That's one of the painful bits. That comes later in the interview. So, yeah, you would, it's not quite how are you today, but tell me in the first place, what are you doing now? What's your job, or what, you know? You start there, but in this case, start with that. So, what I think might be an idea is, have you all got paper and pens? Hey?
Right now,
You've got your,
After,
what I'd like you to do is to, let's, you know, we've got who, what, who, I always pick up the wrong way, put that right down there, get it right. What, when, where, who, why, how. Now this might not work, but you're going to be interviewing a policeman, you're going to be interviewing a teacher, you're going to be interviewing an artist. You don't know who you're going to be interviewing yet, do you? Who do you think you might be? What profession are we talking about?
we still got doctors.
Yeah.
You decide
Okay,
what we like to do.
Teacher?
Teachers really go.
I'll do a doctor.
You do doctor.
Teachers off, dear.
We first doctor then.
For the purposes of today, have a go at doctor. Okay? What I'd like you to do is just take a bit of time and think about some of the questions that you might ask about them, and then coming to Milton Keynes and their job and everything else. That give an example of one of these for the particular person or topic that you're, you know, the profession that you're dealing with. Okay? Is that okay? Is that clear? Have you got a pen? You got a pen again? Oh, you've got one. Jed, have a go at doing that. Just for the police.
Yeah, so I just like ask questions.
Yeah, a what question, a when question, a why question.
And how question.
Go and see what's your purpose to see if there's a quieter place with that noise from that where there's a quiet place.
We do have this room here. I could tidy it up for you. Yeah, the big room is ours. Or we could go to the...
Dot down the back.
Let's see what you're going to come up with.
Mine is very similar. That was anybody who's other stuff I'm actually doing. Now I'm doing it themselves.
But I'm not using this stuff.
They might be using that. That's the end of the day.
Okay. Oh, I see. She might get a special stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll go with my kid and see what.
Yeah, I'm quite free.
Eh?
Free months down the I spoke to him a couple of years ago because it's interesting. I didn't know he was on since April. It was when I started out. It was not really a start. I had features, music, documentaries, all of that. I did probably one of the first feature films because I don't know if you've seen those when I shot a whole feature this weekend.
Have you?
Yeah. I'm very passionate about film, but it's changed quite now. We've got more
Yeah.
than
So what you do this full time? Is it?
I've been doing it for 15 years since I was filming. It's really exciting.
Why have you never seen this? Well, you said you did have something like that.
Oh,
Were
years ago.
you amongst the junior filmmakers from Gilbert?
No, because I was, so it was in early 2000s when I started out freelance from college, because when I was I remember looking at my the college where I did career, so I was on the bus studying, and then I started doing my own project, and then I was freelance, and I actually got the council, they still reaching out, and they sent me some project. I used to do documentaries on legal issues, things like that. I'm an interactions, and I used to do lots of stuff, but it was after your,
Okay, yeah, I'll go on that.
like, yeah, the user, they're legal, you did that.
Yes, yeah, well,
Presentation, I
yeah.
filmed that for them to put on our account,
Oh, right,
because I used to do.
oh, you were in the temple, I gave us a briefing.
Because they got the different user, because when I did it, it was Sharon.
Yeah, sure.
She was,
Yeah.
I don't know anyone.
Well, let's talk after this video when this session's finished, because I'm so desperate about it. Doing documentary. I'm really interested. I don't want to, I want to be able to give people names, people who've done stuff, rather than me doing it.
I work with Yao on it, so I've got this little project.
Okay, what you're doing? You know about it?
Okay, so doctor, what have you got down for?
I've got what's your name? Where were you born?
Oh, this is no, I wanted you to talk about the doctor bit. Go on, what have you got about the doctor bit?
What was it like becoming your first doctor? Any cases that spring to mind?
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
How did you become a doctor in that era of time? Did you face any prejudice in becoming a doctor? Any prejudice?
What
Becoming a
prejudice,
doctor?
rather than did you face it, you actually yes, no, that's a closed question. Is what prejudice did you come with? Well, yeah. I suppose you could start off with a closed question. Did you encounter any prejudice, racial prejudice at all? And then, okay, what form did that take?
I might just saying, would you, or, so what was the way you phrased it earlier?
I said, did you, so you would ask yourself, did you, and then what form did it take?
Yeah, but basically what I was trying to suggest is saying something along the lines of what kind of prejudice did you face, if any?
Oh yes, yeah, that's
So,
right, that's true, that's good, yeah, that's right,
Allows
yeah, that's
some,
very good, yeah, okay. For Yao, or for an artist, or,
Who was a big inspiration for you when you were younger?
yeah,
What's an outstanding moment in your career?
yeah,
When did you feel that you had a big break?
right, yeah.
When did you decide to follow this career? How did friends and family react? No, I think in a wonderful way.
Okay. I think what you need to do, well, I mean, this will be part of what you do, is to make it, is to pin it more to Milk Keynes, bring it into that, what was your big break in Milk Keynes? I mean, I think you do need to get them to describe, what you've done before you came to Milk Keynes and how did you find Milk Keynes and so on. But I think that this is more specifically about their experience within Milk Keynes. Yeah, but that's fine, yeah, okay.
I stuck with what prompted you to want to teach. When did you first start teaching? Are there any students, this is the who one, are there any students in your memory that stand out? Why did you decide to teach either primary or secondary, whenever I stand out? And that's it, Struggle will go into it, sure.
Well, I think the other thing is, I said before about what I call the red letter day. You know, what do you remember about your interview, coming to Milton Keynes for your interview? You know, what do you remember about your first day at work? You know, as you said there, were any particular cases turn out in this way? What was the highlight for you? Okay. And yours, please?
What was your first job as a policeman? Where was the police station you started working at? When did you join the police force? Who are things to do? For one, and for how hard was it? How hard was it becoming a policeman in that time?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Well, what? Or, you know, direct question, how hard was it? How hard was you assuming it was hard? What was it like being the first black girl? What particular issues were there in being the first black policeman?
Was there obstacles?
Yeah, yeah. But it might be that there were advantages. I mean, one of the things about, you know, I bet you felt angry about that, or I bet you felt upset about that, is they're going to think, they want me to say I was upset, when it could be that he was happy as well. You know? So how do you feel about that then? You know, right? This is interesting. I just want to show you this. This is a project. I didn't actually do this, but I think it's a great model. This is for a project we've done with Aston Martin employees. Hey?
Aston Martin would be a good question to talk. But yeah, my daughter was involved.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Aston Martin.
All right. Well, look, this is the idea behind this one. This was a bit like they're all doing the same topic. Actually, they're all going to be interviewing people about Aston Martin. But in a sense here, they've got a kind of a flow. These are topics, rather than always having what, when, where. They've just got the topic. So, start here. Background is what we were saying about them. They were then their early life, family life. And in this case was their early memories of cars and so on. And it could be that if you're interviewing a teacher, what was it? What were your early experiences? Was there anything about your early life that made you particularly want to be a teacher or a policeman or a doctor or whatever? You know? And then they go on to the first job. Why did they apply? The application. These are the kind of things you might have strong memories about. Coming along to the interview, the very first day, your first impressions. And again, you know, going to work in the hospital. You're in a brand new hospital in Milton Keynes. This is, you know, we're talking 84, I think, in the hospital. And, what was it like then in the very early days? And then in this case, they describe in the actual factory where they work. It's like, you know, as you say, the police station, the school, the hospital. And then their colleagues, management, and how did. The other thing is, if you were a policeman in London or in the West Indies or wherever, and you are now a policeman in Milton Keynes, how did it compare? You know, that is always a rich area when you can compare and contrast with things, okay? And then they've gone, what the actual job was. What did you actually have to do as a policeman in Milton Keynes? Because again, back in the 80s, it might have been very different. You might have been the Bobby on the beat, rather than in a car or, you know, whatever. I don't, you know, the way these things all change. You know, what was your Stantonbury? It depends what school they're at. But if the person you're interviewing had gone to Stantonbury in 1974 from another school, there were headlines in the paper locally about the fact that this new headmaster had got carpet in all the classrooms. Revolutionary it was then. And Jeff, who was the head, said, well, when you do move chairs around, it's very noisy. This is a way to make. But it was laughed at. It was a very different school. Called the teachers by the Christian names. Jeff, who was a keen smoker and stuff in the very early days, had a room he knew that the kids were going to go off for quite a fag in the lunch hour, would go off to the fire field. So he had a room dedicated for smokers. I remember interviewing a young lad who come from Glasgow, where they'd all sat in, they'd still had corporal punishment. It was open but your book at page 32. He'd been there for 3 months. He hadn't dared call a teacher by Christian name. Although he smoked, he hadn't dared go in this room because he was convinced that as soon as they're, gotcha, right. So, it's that compare and contrast. This is Milton Keynes, a new place, and often things were very different. Yao particularly talks about the fact that this was like an open canvas here. We use that arts analogy, that anything was possible. When you go to a more established town, that isn't the kind of feeling you often get. So getting that kind of thing, Mr. Lynch going into the hospital as Jimmy was the consultant gynecologist, it was a brand new department. What could you do different there? So that, and how is it different? How could it be? What were your hopes? The thing, particularly people in charge, what are your hopes for? What were your hopes for doing? What do you want to do differently from where you've come before? And then the other thing that people read is the bit about stories and major events. Aston Martin, obviously the James Bond car, and they used to have, Prince Charles was an Aston Martin, they had famous, these were famous things, funny stories, things that will actually, they can kind of bring it alive, particular incidents that they have. And what I tend to, if you're doing an interview, if you structure it, the first part of the interview is easy. That's when we were born, da-da-da-da-da. If you've got some probing questions, like about prejudice or whatever else, things that might be a bit sensitive, you put those in the middle of the interview, okay? You end the last question, normally, what I've been asking now, is normally, think like this, looking back, what are you most proud of? Okay, so you end on a high. It's a kind of a high note to end on. Okay? So one of the things you're going to have to do is work out this kind of list of topics, and they will all be individual, as it were. They'll all be for you, for your particular person, and as I say, hopefully supplemented with some actual things that that came to Milton Keynes in such and such a year as a police constable, ended up as a sergeant, whatever. There'll be bits to help you frame the interview, but there'll be you'll need to work out the other stuff that goes around. And you need to have that, as I say, to give a shape to your interview. And it might be, I don't know whether you will actually do that as a kind of, you'll have the general questions into which the particular person stuff slots. What I'd like to do is let's go and how we might set up for an interview. And we're going to do it round the corner, and I think we're going to use the equipment that I brought along. The equipment that I brought along, you haven't, are you going to be doing all the film work? They're going to do the film, right. The camera I've got, it looks a bit like this one here, not very impressive, but it is shooting in HD, it's shooting very good quality, you can get the sound right, and the other important thing is that it is kind of foolproof. You do not have to be, yes, you do all your twiddling bits if you want to, but you can just set it up in the automatic mode, and you'll end up with something that's really, really good quality. This is not the ideal setup here. For a start, I've just said let's move from here because of that noise there. We don't want that. So let's go and set up. This will not be ideal. Let's just grab the stuff.